Benjamin Walker, age 34, has always considered himself a pretty good driver, just as you consider yourself a good driver. However, within the next 10 minutes, Ben Walker will be involved in an emergency. An emergency caused not by flagrant violations of the traffic laws, but rather by a combination of factors. Things most of us do from time to time when we drive. Things that usually don't get us into trouble, but could when they combine with other factors to produce an emergency in the making. Most of us commit minor driving errors. Although minor, they are nevertheless factors that could contribute to an accident. Most of us drive about safely while handling a variety of these factors. Most drivers can handle at least one such factor. Many can cope with two successfully, some 3, 4, 5, and 6. But when circumstances suddenly introduce one more factor than we can safely handle, this final factor can precipitate an emergency situation. What are factors? Almost anything. The sudden appearance of a pedestrian when you least expect him. The unexpected appearance of a warning sign. Road markers rising from nowhere on a road that you know as well as the palm of your hand. Equipment that's not working properly. Even a distraction created by a member of the family can be a contributing factor. Watch. A road sign can be a factor too. Even a personal habit, like lighting a pipe. The factors contributing to a potential emergency can pop up anywhere, in any type of vehicle. Many of the factors contributing to an emergency you may not be able to control. Case in point, the 4 cars you see before you. Car A, B, C, and D. The drivers of each of these cars you see will commit one minor infraction, one factor that each of these drivers has committed before, and yet driven safely. However, today these factors will combine to produce a potentially dangerous situation when one of these drivers introduces the final factor. Let's watch. Car A in the right-hand lane is driven by Jack Klink. Although he's driven for 30 years, Jack somehow never feels at ease on a modern thruway, especially when trying to locate the exit he wants. To the left of Jack, in car B, is Hugo McBain. Hugo is pulling a small trailer behind his car. The extra load is slowing Hugo down a good deal more than he expected. And as he often does, Hugo is driving in the left lane, making it difficult for those behind him to pass. Hugo will contribute the first factor. Directly behind Hugo in car C is Nancy Stone. Nancy is in a hurry, but she's waited too long before deciding to change lanes and pass Hugo on his right. Nancy will contribute the second factor. Opposite Nancy in the right lane is George Dolan in car D. He is following too closely behind car A. Momentarily, he's distracted by Nancy's pretty face. George contributes factors 3 and 4. Jack Klink in car A will now add the final factor. By suddenly slamming on his brakes, he has just passed his exit. His sudden stop forces George behind him to pull out into the center lane, just as Nancy starts to pass. The result? This emergency situation. Jack Klink, concerned only with getting off the thruway, is not even aware he contributed the final factor. If just one of these drivers had eliminated his initial contribution, chances are the combination of factors needed to create this emergency in the making would never have existed. Let's take a closer look at the factors involved and discover what could have been done. Hugo McBain is driving too slowly in the left lane. If he had moved over to the right and let traffic pass, Nancy would never have pulled out. Or if Nancy had anticipated Hugo in the trailer and changed lanes earlier rather than at the very last moment, she could have avoided the emergency. If George in car C had allowed a greater distance between himself and Jack Klink's car, he would not have had to swerve into the center lane. Once Jack realized he missed his exit, he should have gone to the next exit. If Jack had stopped before he slammed on his brakes, he could have eliminated the final factor that produced this four-car emergency. Often, an emergency situation develops, and you don't have anyone but yourself to blame for contributing all the factors. Take Hank Woods here, for example. Hank, too, is a pretty good driver, but he occasionally takes risks. Up to now, he's been able to keep the factors building up in check. However, this time, it will be different. The rain has made the pavement slick. Factor 1. Hank Woods, anxious to reach his destination, sees no need to slow down. Factor 2. In a hurry, he takes a calculated risk on unfamiliar roads. If that's not enough, Hank Woods takes another risk. He's driving on almost bare tires. Factor 3. He knew their condition, but somehow he never got around to doing something about replacing them. His tires might be all right on dry pavement, but not on a slick, wet surface. They will skid if the brakes are applied suddenly. Now add the fourth factor, the worn-out blades of his windshield wipers. They're causing the window to smear, making visibility difficult. Still, Hank feels confident he can handle these factors without trouble. And the odds are pretty good he can. At least they were, until this final factor was added, producing an emergency. Certainly the construction company deserves part of the blame for not marking the construction area properly. But even so, Hank Woods probably could have stopped if he hadn't taken so many risks beforehand. If he had eliminated any of these factors, he surely could have avoided this emergency. Hardly a day goes by when we don't witness this scene in our travels. A police officer and two irate motorists. Chances are the officer will determine who's at fault. More than likely, it'll be the man operating the car in the rear. He should have stopped in time. Yet many of the factors contributing to this accident will never come to light and are not even known to the motorists involved. Let's see what really happened. Let's see what factors really are involved. To begin with, Factor 1 was contributed by Millie Brown in the VW. Nervous and unsure of her driving ability, she should never have been on this ramp attempting to enter the expressway. The driver of this car, already on the expressway, created factor number 2. Joe Willis, in the right-hand lane, refused to honor this merging traffic sign and moved to his left. If he had, he would have given Millie the room she needed. Millie, edging up, decides at the last minute she can't make it and stops. Meanwhile, assuming Millie entered the main flow of traffic, Marv Kramer turned to check the flow of traffic for his entry. By doing so, he created Factor 3, for Millie had stopped again. Sid Wimble, following closely in the last car, now contributes the final factor. He lights his pipe at the exact moment Marvin hits his brakes. The result, this traffic accident. Finally getting her opening, Millie left the area, oblivious to the fact she contributed to Marv's and Sid's emergency. If any one of the 4 drivers involved had eliminated the factor he or she created, this accident might have been avoided. Regardless of where we live or what we do, the automobile plays an important part in our lives. In our rubber-tired society, most accidents occur close to home and when we least expect them. Case in point, Harriet Wingate on her way to the shopping center with her family. Harriet realizes it's dangerous to have her child standing on the seat beside her, but Bobby enjoys it, and he's close by where she can watch him. Besides, putting him in the back with the older children only leads to trouble. Unwittingly, this will be Factor 1 in an emergency in the making. Harriet's speedometer indicates she's not really driving fast, although maybe a few miles above the posted speed limit. But with a child standing on the front seat, it's too fast. Factor 2. Harriet knows she should keep her eyes on the road at all times, but she's a mother, too. She has to keep an eye on Bobby. She's done this many times. Factor 3. Harriet's inattention to the road. Now let's add a fight between the children in the back seat. Factor 4. And to this, let's add the final factor, this car. True, the driver should have waited until Harriet went by, but he too was in a hurry. The emergency? Just a quick stop, no collision. But as a result, Bobby has a bumped forehead, maybe even a chipped tooth. How could Harriet's emergency have been avoided? Eliminate one or more of the factors that contributed to it. Watch. This time, Harriet has eliminated most of her distractions by having the children safely belted in. Even Bobby wears a safety harness. To eliminate another factor, Harriet merely drives a little slower. By so doing, Harriet now can handle the situation before her with the driver of the other car, the only factor to cope with. Harriet now can stop in time, without fear of hurting Bobby or anyone else in this emergency situation. Factors have a way of building up, and if we aren't careful, by the time we realize what's happening, it can be too late. Watch as they build for Ben Walker, returning with his family from a weekend in the country. Factor 1, Ben Walker is tired. It's been a long day. He's been on the road in the blazing sun since early afternoon. His eyes can no longer focus. He knows he should stop, but he has to get home. Darkness is setting in. Factor 2. What Ben doesn't realize is that darkness is a factor in more than half of all fatal automobile accidents. Factor number 3. Ben's station wagon is overloaded. Unknown to Ben, this is causing his low beams to shoot high, blinding the oncoming drivers. They respond by flicking their bright lights. They're trying to tell Ben to dim his headlights. But Ben has already done this. Not realizing this, one driver retaliates with his bright lights, blinding and confusing Ben. Factor 4. Unable to see, Ben swerves to his right and runs into the final factor, a highway marker placed too close to the road. If any or all of the factors that caused this had been eliminated, Ben Walker and his family would not now be in a predicament. Remember, risks, no matter how small and unimportant, are nevertheless risks, and may prove to be the final factor when combined with other factors to create emergencies. Remember this the next time you drive. Remember it the next time you take a chance. Don't get trapped. The time you take to eliminate the factors that contribute to an accident may keep you from becoming a part of an emergency in the making.